Hi, I'm Liz Holpin from Pinhole Quilting. In this session, I'm going to show how we load the fabric onto the loft frame. The loft frame is mainly used with the Moxie. The Moxie is a 15-inch throat space long arm quilting machine by Handy Quilter, and it's a very practical frame. It can fit in fairly small spaces, being 8 foot, or you can extend it to 10 foot. The model I have here is the 8-foot model. It comes with almost everything, apart from your enthusiasm and creativity, that you need to get started with long arm quilting. Of course, you might be a quilter, but there are some skills that you won't necessarily know as a result of being a quilter that when you get a long arm, you need to learn. And one of those is loading the frame. Handy Quilter supplies cloth leaders, and by those, what we mean by that is these pieces of fabric which are made of twill, doesn't stretch, and it has a nice strong feel to it so that we can attach our quilt backing, and then we put a plumb line on to create a line that we can use as a reference line for bringing up our wadding and then subsequently our quilt top, so that everything is nice and square. The key thing with using a frame like this is to get it right at the beginning. So if we can load the frame correctly, then it's going to be no problem at all as we progress through the quilt. But if we loaded it not on square, or if we loaded it with varying tension, then obviously as it progresses through the quilt, that will then impact what the quilting result is. What we don't want to have is nasty creases or buckles or excess in our quilt when we take it off the frame. It's a horrible surprise if that happens. So we've also got side tension and front to back tension on this frame. It's a 4-rail frame, which basically means that between this, what we call the idler bar, and this bar here, where we're going to put the backing onto, is flat throughout the life of the quilting on the quilt. It's really important because on some systems you only get 3 rails and you have to be constantly adjusting it, which is really time consuming. So a 4-rail frame system is the best. So let's look at these rails in more detail. This one at the back is what we call a take-up rail. It's where our finished quilt will be. So as we progress through the quilt. So unlike with perhaps domestic quilting where you start in the center, having basted it and stabilized it, you'll work your way out. Generally, we work from the top down. So from the top of the quilt to the bottom of the quilt. This one, as I say, is the idler bar or lazy bar, implying it does nothing, but as I've said, it's really important. And then we've got these 2 other front bars. Now with the loft frame, there are 2 different ways of setting it up in either the high or the low position. And we set it up in this low position so that we've got it where we've got this bar here, which is used for the backing, and this bar, which is used for the top. Your wadding goes between the 2. And as we progress, we can tension the quilt. Down at this end, we've got cogs and stoppers, and we've got an extra hand wheel that we use when we wind on the backing. The cogs and stoppers enable us to tension the quilt, but the thing with frame quilting is we don't want it drum tight. Some people have the misconception that it's got to be like an embroidery frame and they've got to absolutely ratchet it up, but it's not the case. What's important is what's happening under the needle. So let's get on and load the frame. So I've got some backing here. It's plain, and that means that there is no right or wrong way up. But the important thing is when you're loading your backing fabric is that you have the right side, if you do have one, pointing at the floor. So it's the wrong side up. And first of all, I'm going to start by just throwing that over the back of the frame. This is quite a long piece, so I'll be able to show you some of the things that are important about the load. When you put your backing and your quilt top on, it's important also to know where the center is. So you'll have folded your quilt in 2 and your quilt backing in 2 and mark the center. As this is straight off the roll, off the bolt, we don't have to do that. There's a nice big crease in it. What you also get when you get this set is you get pins, these very large pins. They've got a nice pearl top. And they're very strong, they're also very sharp, so do be careful when you are putting the pins onto the frame and onto your cloth leader, not to catch yourself, because they do sting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put these 2 the cloth leader and the bottom of the quilt backing adjacent to each other so that they're level, and then I can just pin underneath that in this area here so that it's consistent all the way across. We recommend that you pin from the center to the way onto the left by having the sharp pointy end going to the left hand side. And the final one that you do, we also recommend that you do a double bite. And I normally do that, a double bite coming back the other way. The reason for that being, I have caught myself with that pin on the outside when I've been rolling it forwards. So this way I'm going to do from left to right, so that the reason for this being that when I smooth the quilt, I don't want to catch the pin in the side of my hand. I did have someone else load a quilt frame for me one time, and I ended up with a pin sticking in the side of my hand, and it was so painful because with a huge amount of gusto, I was smoothing the quilt top and it stuck in me. So don't do that. And I'm loading this in a way so that I can still talk to you, but if I was doing this myself, what I would do is I'd just turn around like this and face away from you, but make it easier. So that way I approach the frame, depending on what I'm doing, makes it easier to pin. So if I just angle my body like this, it is a lot easier. So pin all the way to the end and then do your double bite on the way back. Then what we're going to do is we're going to roll this quilt backing on until it's fully loaded. So the pins, as I say, they come with the loft frame. So let's move these things just to one side. That's my quilt top and my wadding, or batting, as the Americans say. So first of all, get your cloth leaders nice and straight. Make sure there's no rucks in those. And I'm going to wind this on, smoothing as I go. The important thing here is not to have it going off like a badly rolled bit of wrapping paper that is inconsistent. So I'm smoothing this. Obviously I would have pressed this. It would be beautifully ironed, but it's straight off a bolt. So there are a few wrinkles and stuff, but not enough to make me concerned, because when I quilt this, you won't see those. So we go all the way through until we are towards the top of the quilt. Now, if it goes out and it's sort of going off in this direction, just smooth it. It is fabric, so it has a certain amount of give. Always have one person do the loading, because it will be much more consistent that way as well. All right, there's my end. Now, this cloth leader needs to go underneath this lazy bar, and I'm going to match up the center of my cloth leader, which is marked with a little black mark, and then I'm going to pin here. Now, I can pin in this direction if I've got the ability to be able to move around the back of my frame. Perhaps it's on the optional wheels. I can move it away from the wall, or perhaps you've got enough space to be able to walk around the whole frame. Then you may want to do the other direction from the back, and sometimes I find that better. It's particularly good if you do have back issues. That slight lean can put a bit of pressure on the top of your back, and if it's a big quilt, you can end up with a bit of backache. So as someone who has a few back issues, I'm aware of these things because my back tells me very rapidly. Now we're pinning end to end, head to tail, head to tail, head to tail. You don't have to overlap. Don't need that many pins in the overlaps. It creates too much bulk, in my opinion. So now I'm going to go around the back of the frame. So I've come around the back and I'm going to pin from this side. You can stay at the front if you wish. Just pull it forward as far as you can, up to the limit of the cloth leader in that direction to make it easier for the pinning. So off we go. And we're going to pin from in this direction, from the center outwards, with the head of the pin on the right, the sharp pointy end heading towards my left. And guaranteed every now and then I will just catch my little finger. These are milliner's pins, so they're designed to be very sharp and very strong and very annoying if you prick your finger on them. You do take more care as a result. You sort of really make sure you know where you're going. And in a minute, I will have finished this end of the pinning, and I'll be able to come back around the front for the next stage of loading the loft frame. So now I'm going to tidy up this one, this end of it, and just tighten that. So this kind of forms a bit of a table, which is quite useful for me doing the next stage of what I'm going to do, which is loading the quilt top. Quilt backing, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to be facing with the right face, the side that you have got the pattern on, it's going to be facing the floor. But with the quilt top, we want it to be facing the ceiling, the sky, the roof, wherever you are. And we're going to start with the bottom. So I'm going to find my cloth leader and I'm going to pin the quilt top to the cloth leader. Just release a little bit of flex on that. And I'm going to start again. I'll have marked my center. Got my center here. And in fact, which way around have I got it? Okay, that's fine. I'm going to mark my center. So here we go. If you haven't done it, you need to do the top and the bottom. Fold it in half. Make a pin. Do the same at the top. So normally I can use the fold if it's straight off the bolt. Of course, you might have washed the fabric. You might have joined the fabric. And if you do join it, make sure that you join it with the horizontal join running in that direction, not all the way down. And the reason for that being that you don't want that central join to be causing bulk all in the same place throughout your quilt. If you have a horizontal join, it's just in that one section. You may also want to have a wider seam and press it open rather than to one side. So just mark this one. So top and bottom, the midpoint of your of your quilt top, which in this case has got the Handy Quilter logo on it. And I've got lots of space either side for practicing my quilting as I go down the quilt. And there's my center. So put those two pieces of fabric together, the cloth leader and your quilt top. Marked at the midpoint, working from the center to the left-hand side with the point of the pin going to my left-hand side from the center out in this direction. And I keep going along until I have them all pinned. Keeping it consistent, you may wish to put a mark down on the cloth leader all the way across the top, perhaps 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch in, so that your pins lay consistently all the way along your cloth leader. If that's something you want to do, that's up to you. Yeah, it may help to keep the quilt on really nice and square. I noticed that some people load their quilts in a particular way. They're very, very methodical and precise about it. And that does end up generally with a much more precise result. Anything you can do right now to eliminate the issues is good, basically. There you go. and I'm going to work my way out in this direction to the right. Now, easiest way of doing it in this direction is to turn my back on you. So I'm going to turn my back and I'm going to go in this direction, because it's easier if I orient my body than it is to sort of have my hand at a very awkward angle. So this makes it a lot easier, even though I'm using my right hand, and it's much easier for a lefty. In fact, your best partner for loading a quilt would be a left-handed person if you're right-handed. So pick your quilting buddies carefully. You might want a pre-buddy questionnaire or something. Do you have predominantly a left or right hand? Do you favor the left or the right hand when pinning? Just a thought. And then we're going to come back and do a double bite at the end with them pointing inwards at both ends. So I'm going to pull that up nice and tight, like so, so that there's no rucks or anything in this front cloth leader. And then I'm going to roll that on. Anything I can do now to eliminate any issues, such as a wonky line, something that's not lined up, perhaps sashing that's running horizontally, you're going to use what I call the Chinese burn, and you wiggle this fabric around until you get a nice straight line. Anything you can do to eliminate the issues right here, right now, would be good. Go as far as about here, and then we're going to drop that forward and we're going to deal with the wadding. So here's my wadding. Make sure you get it the right way up. I have made that mistake where I had a nearly square quilt, and what I did was I slightly turned it 90 degrees, and I found that I was short, but there's actually a technique for joining wadding which is not so painful. So it's not a deal breaker if you get that wrong. So we're going to lay on the wadding, like so, and then I'm going to bring my quilt top up like that. No, I'm not going to leave that down. So I'm going to lay my wadding like this, just tighten that up, and then we're going to do a plumb line, or reference line, so that we can then bring our quilt top up to the reference line. Now I'm ready to do the quilt top. So the quilt top is already pinned to the quilt top bar, which is just here. I've got my machine ready. It's the Moxie, and I've got it set to, I can set it to 4 stitches per inch to do the basting. Basting stitch will go straight across here, and I'm going to use one of the supplied channel locks. This channel lock is just a little circle with a bit of rubber eyes section on the bottom, and what it does is if you put it on the wheels like so, it stops the wheels going forward and back. You can only go side to side, so it enables us to do a plumb line from left to right. You can also put this on the wheels underneath so that it locks those wheels in place too, like so. And then that means you can only go forward back. So let's take that off, move it over here. I've got my thread loaded, and I'm going to put this on the wheel. Now the other thing you can do, and what I also like to do, is just use this here, which is either the rail or it's all the way back on the carriage and it can't go any further. The machine can't go any further. So therefore, I'm able to do a plumb line. So rather than using the channel locks, I'm going to show you how we do that. So I've laid on my wadding. Make sure that it's all the way up to where this is going to run. You'll have cut your wadding and your backing at least 2 inches bigger all the way around. So that's 4 inches bigger than your quilt top, so that we've got the space to be able to do this. So pick up your wadding, sorry, pick up your underneath thread, and then we're just going to run like so, right to the end. Press stop, and then trim your thread. Needle up. You can just pull a length of thread from the cone, move the machine to the side and just trim it. Bring the machine back over to the left hand side, and now we're going to take this up to here. That's nicely centered. And then I just draw this back until it's level with that plumb line. Make sure the center's in the right place. Smooth it out evenly. Don't really force it. You'll have taken measurements all the way down your quilt top to make sure that it's level all the way down. You work to the minimum. So in other words, if your measurements all the way down are 60, 58, 59, 60, you've got to go to the 58 mark, okay? Otherwise, because you can't stretch the 58, but you can ease in the 60. And by using things like spray starch or a bit of spray water to wet the quilt, it will shrink in. I've now put in some pins. I like to put them just at an angle, holds it in both directions, and we're now going to do a wiggly line, 6 stitches per inch, all the way along the top of this edge of my quilt top to baste it in place onto the wadding and the backing fabric. So just secure it, change to 6 stitches per inch on your screen. The key thing here is we're doing this wiggly stitch within what will be the binding area. So just doing a wiggly stitch means if there's any fullness, it doesn't form a fold, it just eases that excess into the wadding. That's it. And now I can come down all the way down towards me. I can use the channel lock to lock it so that the side to side movement is locked. And then I can just bring it towards me. Needle up, take off the channel lock, and I'm going to do the same on the side over there. I'm going to take the pins out, except for that last one on the right hand side as I go. Never leave pins in your quilt. It's so easy to hit them. It's not a Russian roulette that you really want to play. So here we go. Let's move it over here. I'm going to do a line, and you would do this all the way down your quilt to make sure everything is nice and square. So bring up the bobbin thread, securing stitches, 1, 2, 3. Put this channel lock again onto the wheel, and then I'm just going to hold that. Press stop, needle up, pull a length of thread from the cone and take off your channel lock before moving it away to the side, and you're done. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how to load the Moxie on the Loft Frame. Thank you for watching.